there's so many times when you're trying to do automated workflows and like you bang your head against the wall. Along this path of learning these, like these just work super easy. Of course, there's no error checking going on throughout this process, right? I think that that's something that this type of a thing would need, is to have some error handling. So you'd want to add that in, but other than that, it's super, super cool.
You know, I know we've worked with, you've been working with n8n a little bit. I know we've worked with Zapier a little bit, Claris Connect quite a bit. And n8n looks like an interesting, option in that whole integration platform as a service world.
Yeah.
bypass. I guess before we dive into a little bit of a demo, one of the things I'm kind of curious about is how you're finding the breadth of, in Zapier, they're called zaps, and Claris Connect, they're called connectors. But how are you finding the breadth of predefined integrations on n8n?
Yeah, so they're called nodes in n8n, and it's a low code kind of wire things together. So the idea is you don't really have to muck about writing a bunch of code that's going to do all your workflows. It's a drag and drop, select this, select that. Low code is what they're calling it. It still does require a little bit of technical skill and sort of knowledge of the structure of the data that you're moving around, but yeah, they're called nodes in n8n, and it's Claris Connect connectors and Zapier zaps. Everybody's got their name for it. I think in Make they're called nodes as well. But
I was reading an n8n blog post a few minutes ago, and the author of that blog post was expressing appreciation that n8n lets him dive in a little bit deeper. If the zap or the connector doesn't do what he wants to do, he's more easily able to insert his own code to do stuff with n8n.
Yeah, you can do. Yeah, it's very flexible, and it stores credentials. Like, it's got a whole bunch of really cool benefits. With that, I could probably pop into show you guys a little bit of some basic stuff in it, and give you a little bit of breadth of the sort of stuff that it can do.
Quick question for you, Zandon.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Any idea what n8n actually stands for?
I don't. That'd be one. Maybe somebody could give it. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't gone that far. I've just been excited to use it.
It doesn't really roll off the tongue.
n8n, yeah.
It stands for nodemation.
Nodemation. Seems, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, I think I'm more confused now.
Yeah. Nodemation. That's awesome. Automating your nodes. Yeah. So yeah, let me go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my video, and I'll show a little bit of a demo here. So I'm going to actually show two different versions. I've got the locally hosted version of n8n running on my Windows computer, along with some locally hosted LLM stuff to be able to access. And then I also, in order to integrate it with a couple other things, since I'm hosting it locally, I don't have SSL certs in a domain for securing the web requests. So I'm also using, for one of the instances to demo it, I'll be showing the actual, using the actual n8n website, which is n8n.io. And some real basic stuff from a FileMaker standpoint of things that you can do. We can compare it to Claris Connect. We can compare it, to Make. Claris Connect uses, as we'd said, uses connectors, and n8n uses what's called nodes. So in order to do different things with FileMaker, we're going to have to trigger some things. We're going to have to interact with the FileMaker node, and we're going to end up then deciding what we want to do with the information that we get from that. For certain sort of workflows, some things that are hard to do, require a lot of API interaction. can easily be done with some of these SaaS services, right? Like n8n workflow. To get started on how to interact with different things, I've got an example here where I've got a Google Sheet, and basically, if I look at this Google Sheet, it's connected to my Google account, and I've got it set up. And every minute, it's going to check to see if there's been a change on my Google Sheet in my Google Doc folder. And if it is, and from here, I can have it look every minute, and then what I want it to look at, I can tell where in this Google form. If we look at here on my Google Doc, I've got a Google form folder in here. There we go. I've got this weekly quiz, and this is tied to a form that's using Google's form, and the Google form is being presented in a web interface through Google Sites. Form, here's the form itself, weekly quiz, and I've got some information, and I want to take all this quiz information and put it to my FileMaker document whenever somebody submits something. The Google form itself is tied to a Google Sheet, right? So anytime a new line adds in this Google Sheet, I want to push this data into FileMaker. So this is sort of the workflow that we're going to kind of examine real quickly. And then for the front end to present this form, I'm using a Google site where I just created a site. I put the form inside the site, right? So you can give this to somebody or put it in your domain, and then they can fill out this form.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I guess I would have sort of thought that the act of completing the form would have called a webhook that pushed it into, that notified n8n that there was a change, but it looked like n8n is polling Google to see if there's a change. That surprises me mildly.
Yeah, I think if there's a webhook, and this gets into, for the purpose of the demo, I just went for the easiest way, and there's probably, more ways to do it. If you do it a webhook, then you can use a webhook. But because I'm hosting this locally, I can't use a webhook. So because this is a local host for this particular instance, I'm just querying to make sure when it's running that if the document's changed, great, and if it hasn't, just ignore it. But if you have it hosted in a secure environment, you can have a webhook, and then you can fire off that webhook. Then it doesn't have to have some sort of a timer script. But the fun part too also is that in n8n, so in this particular one, you can have all sorts of different triggers. You can trigger it on webhooks. You can trigger it on a cron task. Set a timer that you want it to go off on. You can put all dependencies, like an email comes into your email. So there's all sorts of different ways to integrate it for different types of triggers. But for this particular one, this is that weekly quiz that I'm selecting from my Google document, and I'm looking at the sheet form response, and I'm getting the rows and adding an update, checking them to see if anything's been added or updated, and then it goes ahead and transfers that out. So if I test this flow, you can see we've got the data that's coming through from the spreadsheet that we were looking at, the Google Sheet, not spreadsheet, that we were looking at, and it's available to then pass it off to something else based on what's been entered in here. So from there, if I come on back, so we're saying if something changes in that form, like we submit something, we want to pass that on to FileMaker. And so creating a FileMaker node is pretty straightforward. Let's say I wanted to create a new one. I can just create a new one, and there's tons of different ones in here. There's actions, all sorts of different actions. If you AWS Lambda, if you wanted to Shopify, get information from Shopify, just like Zapier and just like Claris Connect, there's a whole bunch of different actions that you can do interaction with. So for this one, I'm using the Google Sheets one. And then as well, if I search in here for FileMaker, there's a FileMaker one. And so it's kind of built in. And then you can build your step out from there. So from a brand new one, I already have a FileMaker account added, but I would create a new FileMaker credential, and pretty straightforward to create a credential. Just set the host. This, for us, it would be one of our servers. Set the database, set the login and the password. So super, super simple. In the example yeah.
On the FileMaker side, you'd have to have the data API enabled and a privilege, and the user would have to be in a privileged set that's allowed to access it and all that normal stuff, right?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. Let me just skim over that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. There are details to all of this. Yeah. Yeah. And if I gloss over anything, just let me know. So once you've got the credential set like I do, if I want to add another one, I could just pull the exact same credential and just say, we're going to do that. And I could say, get record by ID, or I could duplicate a record. I could find a record. So, let's say I wanted to find a record. I can go, it's going to tell me what are my layouts from that. Here's my FileMaker file that I'm looking at, right? And I've got this layout, weekly responses, whatever. This is the table and stuff or the data that's in there. So I can go to that layout and I can get information from that, take a look at it. I can do a query on it, right? So if I wanted to do a query and say, let's say what field, so we find a field on that layout. Let's say field F3, I think. Let's look at it here. F3 is colors. So I wanted to do green. We're going to look at the color green. So I'd say, let's look at the field F3, and the value would be green. And there's my FileMaker query. If I wanted to use other API features like run a script before or after, you can do that, right? So you can actually, at the same time, if you do nothing, you can just have it fire off scripts on the FileMaker instance from this workflow. So there's some really fun, cool stuff that you can do. At this point, if I test it, I'm going to get the response back, and it shows you in the table format. These are the responses. These are the different fields that it got. It shows you in a JSON format, so you can apply it to something, or you can see it in a schema format. In the schema format, it allows you to kind of visualize all of the different aspects. So different views that are super helpful. And then, of course, at that point, you can take whatever data it is from this and pass it on to something else. So in this instance, I have, and I'm going to delete this one that we created. I am doing the exact same thing with the FileMaker, and I am saying, anytime a quiz is created, I want to pass off the email address and the value of the responses, and I want to create. I want to send an email so that I know that the information was put into FileMaker. So Google Sheet gets a response, tells FileMaker to load the data into FileMaker, and then from there it sends an email in Gmail. And in Gmail, I've found the better way to do Gmail is like we'd recommend for most API interactions with Google Sphere. It would be to use a workspace account and set up a Surface account, because in this instance, like I've got a Gmail account here, and if I go to edit it, I can sign in with Gmail, but it basically gets a cookie, and if that cookie expires, you have to sign in again. So for a workflow, like a one-off, not a huge deal, but if you really want it to be able to run and not have to think about it, a Service account is going to give you that flexibility. And you would be doing the same if you were using Outlook or some other email service.
That's how you do it from FileMaker itself also.
Yes, and you can do, of course, these workflows from FileMaker. You do have to build out all of the, you have to script out all of this in your API interaction, and then do a lot of error handling and that sort of stuff. So this is where you have a dependency if you're using some workflow management, but it can make accessing a bunch of different features a lot easier on the developer, because you're not having to build out each of these pieces, have them, because you're building those dependencies into your FileMaker solution, and then you have to maintain them, but you also have to make sure that you have a pretty high level of expertise about any of those API interactions that you create, because if you don't, you can get an error in there, or something can happen, and if you don't handle for it correctly, your workflow that you're creating in FileMaker would fail. So using some of these platforms, they have pretty robust error handling. They get bounced off, the spaghetti gets thrown against the wall a lot more often, so they get tested a lot more extensively. But yeah, that's a personal choice, right, as to what you'd want to do. So with this, I can test sending the email, and it takes the information, executes previous information, and then goes ahead and tests sending the email, and everything looks good there. So that would be a workflow. Like if I go to, if I'm here on my page, and I'm going to say, here's my form, and I want to do, let's send this to Zandon, and I'm just using this for a test. So we're going to say Zandon plus Diego test.
It's a great feature of Gmail. Anything after the plus sign is ignored for purposes of. You can make up your own email addresses, which when you're doing testing, it's nice. It's so nice to be able to just make up email addresses on the fly.
Nice tip.
Yeah. I don't think I spelled Diego right, but that's okay. I just want to know that it's there. How much did I spend on a car last year? Let's just put in some number. These are just random questions. They have absolutely no bearing on anything. How much to spend on your first car? Let's say $1,200. How much was your second car? $2,000? I don't know. How many people do you know? 334? And submit. So it's been submitted. And so now if we go into our process, you can see here it had transferred through, and I'm not seeing it there. Let's double check let's see. It would send an email. It loaded into our FileMaker. So let's look at our FileMaker. Okay, Zandon at Charlie test. Let's see here. Show all.
There was an option on the quiz to send an email response. I don't know, and that was not checked. I don't know if that has any bearing.
Yeah, it does. So there it just popped up, right? Because it's running every minute. So there it just popped up in my FileMaker solution.
It's only polling every 60 seconds, so it probably hadn't pulled in quite yet, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's it exactly. But the data has shown up in FileMaker. So I've got a sheet, a Google Sheet, automatically flowing into my FileMaker solution at regular intervals. And like you said, you could trigger this with webhook, but you have to host it differently. This is hosted locally. Or I could, hit a button and pull the data whenever I wanted to, sort of thing, if I'm running it local and I wanted to run this workflow locally. Which is actually, and we can talk about this in a little bit, some of the benefit of this. You can host it locally as an instance to work with your FileMaker for one-off kind of stuff, but you could also host it software as a service, host it yourself and secure the instance, or you can host it on n8n's hardware cloud service. And
I glanced at that before the dev meeting. They're charging their software as a service version of this. The entry level cost is $20 a month. I didn't look to see exactly what you get for 20, but to compare it to Zapier and Claris Connect, that's what their software as a service rate is for the entry level account, is $20 a month.
Yeah, I think it's 2,500 executions. It's basically like every time a full flow runs, it's not an individual like node execution. So if you have a complex flow and it runs once all the way through, that's considered a single instance. And if you need more, but if you're hosting it yourself, then you don't need to, then there's no limit. It's whatever resource, but you do have to host it, whether you have a computer that you're hosting in your own data center, or that you're spinning up some sort of a AWS or something like that to host it.
And Claris Connect just changed how they're counting steps. You just described the way n8n does it, how it counts. What they're charging for is the full execution of the whole process, and Claris Connect is now charging based on. They used to charge for each flow step counted towards your limit. And now they're only counting external calls, so only flow steps that are calling to an external API.
Yeah, and that's reasonable, right? That's a lot more reasonable. So that's cool that they're getting with the times. That's exciting. And so anyway, so the email here, FileMaker received your response, basically, is what I told it to send, and so it sent an email to let me know that that it had received a response. And then, I could look in my FileMaker and so on and so forth. So that's a very simple, like, we've got a form, we want to receive information, so on and so forth. Some more advanced kind of stuff. Since I am running this, I forgot to let me do one more on the form side. You can also create a form for n8n. So in this instance, I could just add a new one. We could say form, and self-hosted or local hosted or in the cloud. Either way, you can create a form and just drag, create the node. What is this? This is triggers. Form. Let's see here. n8n form. Yeah, so I've got one here that's a on-form submission. And here's a form created. This has the URL for the form. Authentication, of course, right now is none. And this is tell us about you, who are you, set the field text and the name, placeholder, field where do you come from, text, placeholder, so on and so forth, right? If I test these steps, this would be the form that you would go to. And you can put this address wherever. So you can create forms from n8n automatically without having to do an outside thing like FileMaker. So who are you? From Zandon. Where do you come from? Seattle. And submit the form. So same kind of thing. It flows in, the data goes in, and flows into my FileMaker, would go into a record and create in my FileMaker solution. So
quick question for you, Zandon.
Yeah.
Go ahead and open up that pop-up window that you just had open. The functions that are being called there, are those something that are manually typed in, or are you able to kind of?
Oh yeah. So I wasn't going into the detail like for building it, but so here basically the value that I'm passing into the name field, because I've got my input, right? I can say, where are you? And so that's what this field is here. If I take this out, I can use it. You can do a fixed value and just say whatever it is, but I can just drag this down and say, here, this is the value I want in this field, and it's going to be the JSON object that's passed to it. And then same for this one, right? The where are you from field that's in my FileMaker solution, which is n8n form. There we are, Zandon, Seattle, right? I've got those three values. I had a timestamp in here, but I didn't take time to add that form field in, but you can do.
Seems very intuitive, like very intuitive.
Yeah.
What does the JSON input look like? I'm just curious. It looks like they're dividing it by
table view. Here's the JSON
questions. Yeah, okay. So that's what I thought. Their keys are the questions.
It's just an array. And you can format it however you want, really. Like, but this is the built-in one with n8n. So if you wanted, in part of your workflow, you didn't want to have to use some other form front end, you can do that. So there's tons of like this is. Let me step back just a little bit. Like this was basic, like stuff we do in FileMaker, forms and stuff, right? That we do integrations with. But let's jump out now into a little bit more complex stuff. So we'll save that since that was all working good. I've got a local RAG AI agent here, and yeah. So in this particular one, we're taking some chat input. We're pulling the fields into an AI agent. This allows you to create an AI agent, and then pass it on to different types of AI. In this particular one, I'm using the local version, an LLM of Ollama, to do my inference on. And in Ollama, if we look in here, I'm using the Ollama 3.1 latest version, but I could just as easily change this to whatever else I have hosted in my local LLM. There's a really cool one called DeepSeek R1, which actually has reasoning in it, and it's open source, and it's on par with what you would get currently with ChatGPT in the O1 arena, being that it's able to reason. I won't use that one. I'm just going to use the Ollama one in this instance, but there's some really cool options for the way that you can leverage local LLMs, and open source is, maybe just a few months behind what you're getting in the private models now that they're open source. some open source models are competing really strongly against the big ones. So so this one I'm using local. This means it's not going to ChatGPT. My information isn't being shared with anybody. It's all on this machine. I am storing some of the query chat history into a Postgre database that's also hosted on this computer. And then I'm going to respond to that request with what the AI agent says. In that, I'm using a vector store tool to break down what it is that I'm requesting and break that into vectors and check against my vector store. And I'm using Quadrant vector store in this instance to see about similarities. So then it can respond for questions that I have that are relevant to the documents that I have stored in my vector store. So this allows me to use RAG so that I can ask questions about what I have stored in my RAG solution.
And that's all local as well, right?
What's that?
All of those, their local RAG is all locally hosted.
Yep.
Each of those Quadrant vector store and the embeddings, those are all libraries that are local, right?
They're local on this machine, yeah. And you could host these yourselves, or like right now, and I know we weren't going to go into Docker, but I am using Docker in order to host these. So I've got an n8n instance, my Postgre instance, OpenWebUI, Quadrant, and multiple different.
Okay.
I've also, and this is exciting, outside of this topic, I don't know if you'd seen that they were talking about ChatGPT having the ability to scour the internet, do the internet thing for you, and you could, I forget what it's called, it's like product or something like that. Well, there's already been open source model solutions that do the same thing, so you can have an AI agent do stuff on your behalf with the web page. So I've also got an instance of that hosting on here.
What is what's the dashed line versus the solid line mean?
These are one-to-one, meaning they're passing the data in directly. These are tool calls from the LLM. So it's being determined by the LLM and then passing it on to the LLM. And then same here. If it gets a tool call, it's going to pass it on to the vector store. So if we look at this AI agent, it is just doing everything automatically. There's nothing really hard set. But if you want to, you can go in and manually set up properties and the way that it's going to handle its tool calling. And I'll show you that in another one in just a sec. But this one's really basic. It's only going to take my chat. So if I ask it questions, if I ask it, what do you know about FileMaker? And we say yes, it's going to give me a response. And this is just for testing right now. It goes ahead and stores it. Might take a moment, but you can see it running it up here. It's asking the AI agent. It's asking a llama. And I think when I'm not in a Zoom meeting, this runs a little bit faster, but we'll see. If it doesn't finish quickly, then my little laptop with this GPU. Okay, there we go. So now it's checking in our vector store. It's looking at the different models and it's storing that information. And so the Llama chat model says, "You're a helpful assistant. What do you know about FileMaker?" is the question. Looks in the vector store. What do you know about FileMaker? I don't have any context with, right? Please provide the necessary information so I can assist you better. So because we don't have any information about FileMaker, it's going to let the response back from the chat model is basically output. I don't have any context, which is we want. We don't want it to hallucinate, tell us a bunch of stuff. But so now if I take this a step further and I want to put a document in here, I've got a separate portion down here that looks in my Google Drive, and any file that's dropped into a specific folder or updated in a specific folder, it's going to take that and get an ID for it. It's going to remove the old vectors so we don't have duplicate vectors for any files that are in there. It's going to download the file. It's going to extract text from the document. It's going to fire off, it's going to put a record in FileMaker so that I can see it also in my FileMaker. It's going to send an email letting me know that I've added a document, and it's also going to push it into the Quadrant vector store and store it so that I can run a query on it in the future. So in this particular instance, if we do one for my Google Drive, and let's see, let me go to my local LLM real quick, and we'll say, I'll just do a new one using Llama. We'll say, tell me something, a fact about, an interesting fact about FileMaker. So this is running local. Here's some information about it. And the only reason I'm doing this is so that I can put this information in my vector store, my RAG repository. So I'm going to copy this out and say, this is great. This is some information I want to be able to reference later. So I'll go into my Google Drive, into my local RAG testing folder where I've got all my docs, and I'm going to create a new one in here. And we will paste the information in, and we'll just title this FileMaker. It doesn't have to be titled FileMaker, but that way I know what it is. And yeah, so there it is. So we've added a RAG document to our workflow. And now theoretically, if we come back to our n8n instance, it should have picked up the document and sent it out. And I would know that because I am also monitoring emails to know that a new document would have been sent. So let me check my email. And here at 8:57, is that right? We got a new FileMaker received a response. No, I think this is the, time is it now? 9:20? Okay.
And this is the same sort of thing. You've got the node set to poll the Google data once every minute or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, let me double check my Gmail account, HTML, JSON data. Yeah, I guess we can look at my work. Oh, my workflow is inactive. Well, let's test the workflow. So I messed up. It was not running. So I may need to, let's do file created. Let's run this again and see. Yeah, I need to go back out. I didn't have it running when I dropped the document in. So I messed up. Let me just do this.
You just copy it?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It's, where is it? FileMaker? I'll do this one. Make a copy. All right, come back here, and let's see if we got a new one in our FileMaker solution. And I think I'm putting these into our PDF documents. Yeah, so here it's processed through the flow. It pushed into FileMaker, sent me an email. FileMaker got the text from the document that it pushed in. Here's an interesting fact about FileMaker. And the email, I think, is going to this email, which, yeah. If I go back to my inbox, it should have been sending an email, but I'm not quite sure exactly the email that I've set up. I apologize. Sometimes there's so many different things that I'm trying to show off, but it did send an email. I'm not sure exactly which email address it was sending it to. All right, so if we go back,
I think it was the Zandon at Portage Bay, like your normal work one, but it's probably not important.
Yes,
unless you want to see the email.
That would be, yes, here it is, inbox. Yeah, labels for fun. Here's an interest. Yes, okay, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, labels for fun, it sent the email to my Xana. Yes, thank you. So there it is. Anyway, so now it's in our RAG, right? Now, theoretically, we should be able to, if everything works, we should be able to ask it in our chat now about what can you tell me about FileMaker? And now, theoretically, if everything works, we should get a response based on the new updated information in our RAG.
Now it's having to query the vector store for that.
Yep. And so it's querying quadrant.
If you give it a long document, one would expect it might take a little longer to be able to do the query, I assume.
It depends on the resources. So yes, if you've given it a long document for its embedding, it might take a little bit of time, depending on the hardware you're storing, you're doing your vector store on, so on and so forth. So this is just a 16 gigabyte GPU 1070 MSI laptop. So not super new, like this is like 4 or 5 years old. But you can see it came back with the response here. Today, FileMaker is still widely used. So it gave a pretty good response based on the RAG that I'm using. Didn't try to answer something it couldn't answer. This is cool because you could also, so this is using Quadrant as the vector store. You could use Pinecone if you were hosting it. But you could also use FileMaker. So you can also do this type of thing with FileMaker using FileMaker as the vector store. There aren't tools built into n8n to do this, but you know, I don't want to say that you couldn't do this with FileMaker, because you totally could. And then it's bringing it back into our embedding. So that's some basic. I have one more that I wanted to show, and this is a little bit more. This is a little bit more exciting. Let me go to. This is n8n hosted on the n8n cloud, and I did this so that I could have a webhook to interface with an application called Telegram. I don't know if anybody's used Telegram. I wasn't familiar with it before this, but it basically is a messaging app. You could use, and there's several different messaging apps that you could use, but as long as you can get an API key and interact with it, it works great for testing this one. So this solution is tied in where you can have it where I can ask questions, and this is, I have this on my phone. I can use it to interact with my workflow on different levels. So in this Telegram AI tool that's active, it's a much more complicated flow, but it's actually super easy. There's a tutorial about this, and I want to reference two YouTubers that I've been following that do walkthroughs on all of this. There's several different YouTube videos, so I don't want to take the limelight away from anybody. I just don't know the names off the top of my head. But this particular workflow was one, and it took the whole tutorial walkthrough is like a 45-minute video, and I did it last night, and it took me maybe an hour and a half to go through the entire process and pin everything down exactly as it was. You can also just copy it, pull it in, and make it work, but I wanted to go through the entire workflow to see how it was done. But basically the way that this works is it looks to see, it's triggered by the webhook if a message is received, and then if a message is received, it takes a look at it and says, is it an image? Is it an audio file? Or is it text? And then if it's text, it just passes it on to the AI agent. In this instance, I'm using OpenAI, but I could just as easily be using my local LLM. Yeah. I would just need to be able to, if I'm using cloud resources, if I was hosting all this on my own cloud resource, then I could reference everything locally in that cloud instance. But because I don't have any cloud resource right currently, I'm using ChatGPT for my LLM. If I was doing this locally on my machine and set it up with the security and everything, then I could use the webhook. But for this, I needed to use the webhook. So it goes, asks ChatGPT. I've got a buffer memory stored locally. If it gets audio, it's going to use OpenAI to convert it to the audio to text so that it can put it in the large language model. If it gets an image, it's going to turn that into code, analyze the image with ChatGPT. And again, I can use any multimodal LLM. It doesn't have to be ChatGPT. It formats it and then outputs it back to Telegram. In this particular instance, I can ask it to send emails, read emails, send emails, get calendar events, set calendar events. I can use it to scrape the internet as well. I've got it connected to a Pinecone vector store for storing information there. So another, seems like complicated workflow. It's not really overly complicated. It's just one of the really cool things that you can do when you start meshing these all together. And so so I can do things like say send Zandon plus PBS test at portagebay.com, an email letting them know the meeting is almost done with the demo. with the demo, and we'll fire that off. And theoretically, this should show the execution as it comes in here. And you can see we've got, it's come back and says I've sent the email to Zandon informing them that such and such, blah, 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 right? And now, of course, if I look in my email here, I should have just gotten an email from it. It says, hi, Zandon, I wanted to let you know that the meeting is almost done with the demo. If you have any questions, need anything further, best regards, Zanbot, because this is coming from my robot, right? More complex stuff that we can do in that same sense. If I come back to the correct tab in my browser, I can ask it to schedule a follow-up about the YouTube videos for tomorrow at 6 p.m. and fire that off, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to connect to my calendar, send it to the calendar using the LLM, and so on and so forth. And theoretically, again, this is using, I've scheduled a follow-up meeting, and if we look in here under the calendar for my, there we go, we got follow-up about the YouTube video. So, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to use my Mac really quick, and I'm just going to, on here, I'm going to ask it, let's see here if I can do this. What do I have scheduled for tomorrow? Let's see if this works. I might not, I don't have a microphone on this machine, so this is not going to work. Nope, it did, okay. And it replies back with audio since I sent audio. I'm going to play it just lightly. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it.
I've successfully scheduled a follow-up meeting about the YouTube videos for tomorrow at 6 p.m. Here are the details. Event, follow-up on YouTube videos. Date, January 29th, 2025. Time.
So I don't know if
yeah, we could hear it. That was cool.
Yeah. At the same time, I said, what do I have on my calendar for tomorrow? And it's running through and querying it, and it's going to pull that information up on this. And here's the follow-up, YouTube videos. It appears you have 2 events related to YouTube videos. Anyway, so you can see there's all sorts of crazy fun things that you can do as far as building workflows and integrating it in different ways. I did have one last one, I think, in here. Get data from FileMaker. So this was a really basic one, like when clicking this, I want to pull the data from FileMaker, but I won't go into that too much. Does anybody have any questions as I kind of running through really fast?
Oh, but this is pretty intriguing. Actually, pretty excited to go try it out.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of demos where I'm just instantly excited to try them out. So this one's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like the graphical nature of how it diagrams the flow. Obviously, we're using some AI examples, but you could have you could create complex workflows just strictly between APIs, where you had it do something in QuickBooks and then something else in FileMaker and then something else in same kind of thing as Claris Connect, but you've got a little bit of a more graphical UI for how the flow is structured.
Yeah, totally. And the cool part is, like, let's say you didn't want to host an n8n, or you didn't want to risk your data being exposed. You could host it locally and have it run, and you could fire it off by a trigger or whatever you need. This, I did want to show you the executions. So for this last one, right, where we sent the message, this is the stamp of the actual execution. That each of the executions as they run allow you to go through and look at all the entire flows.
Oh, yeah.
So here, if we look at, we can see exactly what was on that particular, what came in, right?
Green line is how it executed.
Yeah, exactly. We can look at it and say, what did the AI agent do here? And it tells, takes the data that came in, see what went in. Here's what the input was. And then it goes down, what did it ask the LLM? Did it ask it? Yes, it did. This is what it sent to the LLM, and so on and so forth. So you can walk through the flow to see, of course, if there's any problems, exactly what was being handed off where. We can see that it created a calendar event. And these were super easy to set up. There we go.
With your server. That's with your server account once again.
Yeah, so like if let me go back to the editor, like setting up the calendar is literally this hard. Calendar, let's see, Google, and there's, tons of them, but it would be the same with Outlook. Google Calendar, create an event, and then I use my credentials and the event name, and then when does it start? These you would key in with whatever data you're passing into it. In this instance here, where I was taking data from, for set calendar, taking the data from the LLM. Let's get back up.
This could be a good tool for mock-up as well. I mean, if you weren't going to go in the direction of using n8n, just mocking out the situation that you're trying to recreate in FileMaker. It's essentially giving you all the information and how to make and format the calls for every situation.
Yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, so in this instance, it's taken from AI. It's going to take start, it's going to take end, and it's going to take the email title to send the set calendar event, the title. So it's using those values in order to generate the calendar event, and that's what would be coming in. It's debugging that. Yeah, I've just been getting really super excited about it because we do this a lot. Oh, here, this one's dead, so I can't really use it. That's the one I just dragged and dropped on there. But it's super easy to make these nodes interconnect, and they work really efficiently. Like there's so many times when you're trying to do automated workflows and like you bang your head against the wall, and like along this path of learning these, like these just work super easy. Of course, there's no error checking going on throughout this process, right? So I think that's something that this type of a thing would need, is to have some error handling if you had fail points that you were concerned about. So you'd want to add that in, but other than that, super, super cool.
Anybody have any questions?
No, that was pretty thorough.
Yeah, thank you, Xander. Anybody have any last minute questions?
No, I was just going to throw out that I know Better Forms uses n8n normally for their workflows. They've showcased it a few times as a tool that they're actively using.
Cool.
I don't know what they use it for, but they've showed it a few times.
Definitely looks intriguing.
Thank you for spending your time with us at the FileMaker DevCast today. We hope you found something useful, something thought-provoking, and something to take into your own development approach. Things that help you to be more productive and to allow you and your team to get more done in less time. Find us online at portagebay.com and filemakerdevcast.com, and also on social media at FM DevCast and Portage Bay. Let us know if we can help you or your company with modernizing your approaches and streamlining your workflow. We look forward to seeing you at the next DevCast.